My daughter-in-law gave birth and completely stopped communicating with me. I came to them. It turned out that their house was empty. My son, David, who is 31, has been married to my daughter-in-law, B, who I believe is around 24 years old, since September 2020. Due to the pandemic, I never really had the chance to get to know her well. They had been dating for about a year before they got married, but I wasn't aware of her until they were already 6 months into their relationship. I deeply love my son, but I felt that our relationship has become strained since he got married. He has a 10-year-old daughter from a previous relationship, and our bond has also changed since he got married. Part of this shift is because he moved out of my house quite suddenly, without much explanation, and I no longer see his daughter on the weekends he has custody. I've tried to encourage visits with her when they have her, but it seems I only get to see her once a month or so. Lately, she seems more distant during these visits, which I suspect might be due to B possibly speaking negatively about me in her presence, which I find unfair. They welcomed a baby at the end of January. B was induced because of preeclampsia and was in labor for 3 days before undergoing a C-section. A few weeks prior to the birth, I was in an accident and currently don't have a vehicle. My son wouldn't pick me up to either be there during the labor or visit the baby in the hospital afterward, although B's parents were allowed to see the baby and were in the parking lot the entire time. I tried calling him a few times while she was in labor, but after hearing B telling him to hang up during one of those calls, he stopped accepting my calls. I was just concerned and wanted to ensure they were all okay. B stayed in the hospital for 2 days following the C-section, but they didn't stop by to see me on their way home after the birth because she was in pain, despite having pain medication. My son mentioned she didn't feel right, which made me worry she might be experiencing postpartum depression, PPD. My daughter ended up helping them out by picking up B's prescriptions and some groceries, and she got to see the baby that night. It seems she and B have a good relationship. I had planned to visit them a couple of days after they returned home, but B felt something was off and decided to see her doctor again. This led to her being sent back to the hospital. My son informed me that she was diagnosed with postpartum preeclampsia. I was under the impression that preeclampsia only occurred during pregnancy and resolved after giving birth, so I thought perhaps there was some confusion. The day after she was readmitted to the hospital, which was 5 days after the baby's birth, and a time when everyone else had met her except me, happened to be my birthday. I called B early that morning, around 8, to get a clearer picture of the situation, but she didn't answer. Later, my son called to wish me a happy birthday and questioned why I had tried to contact B. I lost my temper a bit and told him that B should be the one calling me back since I had reached out to her first. I ended up hanging up on him, and about 5 minutes later, B called me back. I expressed my disappointment that she hadn't called sooner and explained that I wanted to hear directly from her about what was happening, mentioning that my son sometimes gets details mixed up. When I inquired whether her condition was mental or physical, there was a brief silence before she confirmed it was physical. She seemed a bit irritated when explaining that her bed had padding due to a risk of seizures and that she couldn't be alone with her newborn, assuring me she was quite certain of her condition. I chose not to comment on her tone, understanding she must be under a lot of stress. She was discharged the next day, and they stopped by to visit me while I was at my daughter's house taking care of her 2 children. This allowed me the chance to finally meet the baby. I offered B some pillows to sit on because my son had mentioned she had a tough delivery, making me wonder if she was experiencing any discomfort. However, she declined, stating she felt fine and was actually feeling pretty good. 2 weeks after the hospital incident, my son came over to take me to their place for a visit. I was there for a few hours, but she didn't really engage with me much. She was quiet and stayed on the couch most of the time. On the drive home, I asked my son why she seemed so distant, and he explained that my behavior during her hospital stay had upset her. He pointed out that it wasn't right for me to expect her to call me first, and that asking if her condition was mental or physical was inappropriate since he had already informed me it was physical. He also mentioned that I shouldn't have announced the baby's birth on Facebook before she did, and that I was inconsiderate when he asked me to remove the post. Since she rarely uses social media, I hadn't thought it would be an issue. He hasn't been able to bring me to see the baby again because he says his presence is needed at home to help out, and they're not comfortable bringing the baby to my house. I've told my son that I'm considering quitting my job to help take care of their child, but I haven't been given her return to work date yet, nor has she thanked me for offering. It feels like she's holding on to small grievances and using them as reasons to distance me from my son and granddaughter. I want to build a relationship with her, but I'm missing out on precious moments with the baby, which is hard for me to overlook. These issues seem minor, and it's frustrating that she hasn't tried to discuss them with me directly. I'm thinking about sending her a message to express how I feel and try to resolve our differences. However, I'm aware there might be cultural nuances influencing this situation, so I'm seeking advice on how to approach the conversation. Relevant comment. Commenter. It's crucial to understand that your approach and expectations may need some adjustment to mend the relationship with your son and his wife. The birth of a baby is an incredibly personal and sometimes overwhelming experience for new parents, and their priorities are naturally focused on their immediate family unit, each other, and their newborn. Here's a more constructive perspective on the situation. 1. During labor and birth, your son's main responsibilities were to support his wife and ensure the well-being of their baby. It wasn't feasible for him to cater to additional requests, such as picking you up. Public transport or ride-sharing services are alternatives for visiting them in the hospital. 2. After going through labor and childbirth, it's understandable that they chose to head straight home instead of making detours. This decision was likely made for the well-being of both the mother and the baby. 3. Questioning the nature of her health issues, physical or mental, can come across as intrusive, especially when your son had already informed you of the situation. It's important to respect their privacy and the information they choose to share. 4. The period following the birth of a child is exhausting and challenging for new parents who are adjusting to their new roles and recovering from the birth process. It's a time when empathy and understanding from family members are greatly appreciated. 5. Considering the circumstances, expecting your son to provide transportation might have added unnecessary stress. Utilizing other transportation options could have been more considerate. 6. Offering to help by babysitting is kind, but it's essential to ensure that such offers are welcome and aligned with the parent's wishes and comfort levels. 7. Sharing significant news about the baby on social media without the parent's consent can be seen as overstepping boundaries. It's important to respect their right to share news about their own child in their own time. 8. If you wish to reach out and mend fences, consider sending a message that acknowledges your understanding of these points and expresses your sincere apologies for any stress or discomfort you may have caused. Offer your support in ways that respect their boundaries and preferences as new parents. My answer? As a grandparent, I feel it's important to have a role in my grandchildren's lives. It's also crucial for me to ensure that my relationship with my eldest granddaughter remains positive and that she isn't influenced against me. While I understand that my son and his family don't owe me in the strictest sense, I believe that family relationships do entail certain expectations of mutual support and communication. My love for them is deep, and I hope we can resolve our issues without escalating to legal measures, which I believe would recognize the value of my involvement. 1. My initial hope was for my son to visit before his wife's labor intensified, making communication easier. Our area lacks taxi services, and an Uber ride was beyond my financial means. 2. After being discharged, my daughter-in-law chose not to take any pain medication. I had prepared food for them, hoping to ease their burden and not just to see the baby. 3. There were moments when I doubted the accuracy of the information my son provided, as there have been misunderstandings in the past. 4. I've come to understand that not everyone views post-birth communication in the same way my family does. It seems there's a cultural difference at play, which I hadn't considered before. 5. The lack of Uber service in their small town prevented me from visiting more frequently. If it were an option, I would have used it rather than relying on my son for transportation. 6. When I learned about their struggles with finding reliable daycare, I offered to help, seeing it as a way to support them and ensure the safety of my grandchild. 7. My intention wasn't to overstep by announcing the birth of my grandchild on social media. I didn't realize it would be an issue. Upon understanding their perspective, I promptly removed the post. 8. I've apologized to my son, and through him to his wife, whenever he's indicated that I've unintentionally caused upset. My goal is never to hurt her feelings. I wish she felt comfortable discussing these matters directly with me so I could explain myself and better understand her viewpoint. I sincerely hope for an opportunity to clarify any misunderstandings and to find a way forward that respects both their boundaries and my desire to be involved in their lives and those of my grandchildren. Update. I reached out to my daughter-in-law to apologize for the issues my son had mentioned, hoping to mend our relationship. I passed my apologies through him since I was advised that it was his responsibility to manage matters within his family. Unfortunately, I didn't receive any acknowledgement or response from B, which left me feeling unresolved. In my frustration and concern for maintaining a relationship with my grandchildren, I sought legal advice last Friday and met with a lawyer on Tuesday to explore the possibility of asserting grandparents' rights. The lawyer believed I had a strong case for visitation with my older granddaughter, though not much hope with the newborn. I began the legal process but found myself questioning this decision by Tuesday night, especially after discussing it with a friend. The situation escalated when I received a message from B, informed by a mutual friend that I was pursuing legal action and expressing her disappointment in my actions. She clarified that she hadn't prevented any contact with the children or my son, and highlighted that I hadn't made efforts to visit since the last time my son picked me up. She expressed her exhaustion from the delivery and postpartum period, indicating that she had no energy to engage in further conflict. B also criticized the nature of my apology and informed me that any future communication would need to go through their lawyer, stating that I had been removed from her social media and warning against sharing any photos of the children online. Feeling regretful and realizing the gravity of my actions, I attempted to reach out and explain that I no longer wished to pursue legal action and that my decision was made in a moment of anger. However, it seems I'm already blocked from contacting her directly. My son confirmed he was aware of B's message and implied it was more restrained than what he would have preferred to send. At this point, I plan to discuss the message with my lawyer, hoping it might illustrate B's reluctance to reconcile, which could potentially support my case for visitation rights with my oldest granddaughter. Despite the unfortunate turn of events, my goal remains to find a way to maintain a connection with my grandchildren without further escalating tensions. New update. B and I had a rough patch after their new baby arrived, and unfortunately my son and granddaughters ended up being affected by our issues. This all started back in March, and looking back I realized there were things I said and did that I regret. While B hasn't said sorry, I believe she probably regrets some things too. The whole story is a bit complicated to get into, but at one point things got so bad that I even talked to a lawyer about getting rights to see my grandkids. During that period, my son stopped talking to me, but after I decided not to go through with the legal action, I hoped we could mend things. My son mentioned he'd like things to be normal again too, but he was also honest about the damage that had been done and wasn't sure if things could ever be completely the same. For Mother's Day, my daughter planned to take me out for dinner, and she really wanted David, my son, to come along with the baby. The oldest was with B. After some convincing, David agreed, but only if we didn't do it on Mother's Day itself. He came with the baby and B. Throughout dinner, B was pretty quiet, but did chat a bit with my daughter. It seems they get along well. B kept the baby close the whole time and didn't let me hold her or take any photos. Considering our past issues involved photos and social media, I thought this was a bit unnecessary. Despite this, I'd still say the dinner went well overall. After the dinner, I gave my son a hug and told him I was proud of him for standing up and bringing his daughter along, hoping he'd keep doing that. In hindsight, I realize I shouldn't have said that. Later that night, my son called to tell me he couldn't keep up a relationship with me. He explained that B is their child's mother and he wouldn't go against her wishes. I was upset and had been drinking because I've been struggling, and I admit I reacted poorly during the call. I criticized him for not standing up to his wife and for not visiting me on Mother's Day because I am his mother. He hung up on me. The next day I called to apologize profusely, acknowledging my mistake and expressing my desire to mend our relationship. However, he said he couldn't do it anymore. Since then, I've been devastated, but I understand to some extent. I decided to call him again last night, telling him I would stop reaching out to him and be for good, respecting his wish for us not to have a relationship. I also mentioned removing him as my power of attorney and from my will, so he wouldn't have to deal with anything related to me in the future. I don't have much anyway. This upset him, and he called me a terrible mother, which led my daughter to accuse me of being manipulative. I'm at a loss because I thought I was just trying to respect his wishes. Last update. After discovering a link that I believe led to my daughter-in-law's Reddit posts, I took the time to read through the criticisms directed at me. This experience, along with seeing her perspective on our situation, prompted me to reflect further. While some individuals assured me that I wasn't in the wrong, attributing the issue to what they perceive as the younger generation's lack of family values, her posts made me reconsider. I couldn't help but feel that my harsh judgment stemmed partly from the apparent scarcity of parents and grandparents on Reddit. Following this revelation, I visited my son and daughter-in-law's house, only to find it nearly empty, which aligned with my fears after reading her post and some comments. Discovering the listing, which had been up for nearly a week and was already pending, left me clueless about their new location. The house was shown mostly empty in all the photos. My suspicion is that they purchased their new home under an LLC, and I'm currently trying to figure out how to uncover the LLC's name to locate them. A neighbor informed me that they moved out at the beginning of May, indicating my son had kept this from me for quite some time without mentioning it during our dinner. Despite seeking help from my therapist, I'm still struggling emotionally. My son seems to have vanished from my life. I understand that judgments are being made based on my brief posts and my daughter-in-law's detailed complaints, but I can't shake the feeling that he wouldn't take such steps without influence. Although I believe his wife has played a manipulative role, I acknowledge my missteps in handling the situation, which only pushed him further away. If I had simply focused on fostering a relationship with my son and granddaughters without causing friction, things might not have reached this point. Looking back, I realized the importance of maintaining a positive facade. One person really made me think when they asked, "Do you want to be right, or do you want to have a relationship with your son and granddaughter?" I realize now I made the wrong choice. My therapist has advised me to take some time to heal before taking any action, but my current plan is to save up some money and hire a private investigator to locate my son. Once I find him, I hope to rebuild our relationship and regain his trust, so we can work together to move past this situation. I admit that I've made mistakes. I was too demanding and critical, and I see that now. But I don't believe I deserved this outcome. Using children and grandchildren to drive a wedge between family members is wrong. Although I plan to continue seeking advice, I'll be doing so under a different account, especially after someone linked my posts from another account and informed my daughter-in-law about them. To that person, I'm not appreciative of your actions. How do you like this story? Write your opinion in the comments. Let's get 1,000 subscribers on this channel. Love you.